Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of the Average Gamer podcast. My name's Grant from Over the Edge. I'm joined by show regulars Sully from One Guy's Opinion and Joe Chip. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about why some game companies are shipping games without an ending. We're also going to be talking about what path will VR need to take in future in order to be successful. And the final topic is identity politics and its impact on the gaming community. And at the end of the podcast, we're going to have a bit of a free-for-all discussion on the No Man's Sky controversy and The Last of Us Part 2 reveal. So let's start with my topic, which is a recent news item that I read where a game company, the one in question, which was Capcom, he found out that with the recent release of Dead Rising 4, the actual ending to the game is being shipped with the DLC. It's not on the actual disc that was released for gamers to play, which made me do a double take when I actually saw this on a news article. And I saw a video which was a follow-up video from a YouTube channel called Pretty Good Gaming, which I recommend that you watch, and we might be able to put a link in it to it actually. But I wanted to ask you guys' thoughts on this actual practice, because it seems to me quite an insidious practice. So you wouldn't actually release a movie where they just suddenly someone appeared at 10 minutes before the end and said, sorry, you don't actually have the ending to this. If you come back in 3 months' time and pay half the admission fee, you might be able to see the ending.
Don't say that, Grant. It hasn't happened yet, but it could happen.
I'm like, I just find it ridiculous that you can release a game without an ending, though. How could they get away with this as a practice? I mean, this isn't a new thing, is it? I mean, I think this has happened This happened before with the Mass Effect, or one of the Mass Effect games, if I'm right.
Actually, happened on Destiny.
Did it happen on Destiny?
Oh, well,
right.
Yeah, Destiny released the disc with it on the disc, and they tried to explain it away and whatnot.
I think there was a lot more that happened there as well, though.
Yeah, there was more going on, I think. But I never played Destiny, so it never really got under my skin too much. But apparently some of the DLC was actually on the disc to be unlocked later.
Oh, okay. So that's another issue, which is kind of also a sort of part of this issue, which is locking away content on discs.
We've seen that before.
Content.
Yeah, I think we had DLC rise up and become prevalent and become a thing, and I think it's probably a few years ago, I think we started seeing developers push it a little bit too far, and I could have swore it was Capcom. I might be mistaken, but there was a fairly popular game that released that they did get caught red-handed with DLC literally being on the disc that you had to pay for at day one at launch.
Yeah. So
it's madness, and it feels like we've gone full circle again.
I mean, a game like Dead Rising is a very popular game. It's a big franchise, and so it's going to be in the spotlight in terms of publicity on a lot of the gaming websites. So I wonder, the logic and of shipping a game like that without an actual ending and expecting people to pay another £15 or $30 to get the actual ending that they should have received in the first place. I mean, I just don't understand it at all as a practice. It makes no sense.
Sorry, Grant, am I right in understanding that there are endings to Dead Rising, and there's quite a few different alternate endings, but none of those endings are considered the official ending? Has that been confirmed that none of those endings are the official ending?
As far as I know,
understand it.
Yeah, that's right. There's like a final boss, but it's not the proper ending to the game. So I think, from what I remember about Mass Effect 3, there was a few furore about the ending. People didn't like it. So what they did is they kind of went away and rewrote it, as far as I know, for like the DLC, or they put a different ending in, and that was in response to the sort of controversy over the original ending. That's a slightly different issue to here, where they're kind of cynically expecting you to pay more money to get a complete game.
Yeah, whereas the Mass Effect was free DLC, I'm pretty sure, because I remember being in that same boat when I played it.
Yeah.
I think that was more of a cock up. I think the whole Mass Effect thing than necessarily greed or anything sinister like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder. You see, if we've got this whole issue, this whole hot topic of microtransactions at the moment in games. You've got a lot of game companies. So I noticed a story today about how Activision slipping in microtransactions into Call of Duty more and more. I can't remember exactly, but there's something that Jim Sterling was talking about because he's obviously he's a very vocal opponent of microtransactions, full stop, in the gaming industry. But my fear is that if Capcom are going to be doing this with a high profile game, other companies will think they can get away with it, in other releases.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's testing the waters, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah.
It is, but we've seen them test the waters like this in a similar fashion before and it backfired. Like, obviously, they're getting hit with a lot of backlash and rage and hate, and people will boycott this game. But then again, they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't think they could get away with it to a certain degree, Like, that's why we see microtransactions in so many games, and we do see shady practices like this happening because they're getting away with it. And I think every time we see this happen, like, this is a perfect example of them pushing the boundaries again.
Yeah. Do you think gamers are just sitting back and taking too much of this and they're not actually making enough of a stand against these sort of...
I don't think they're sitting back. I think they're bending over and handing out the Vaseline. I think that gamers have basically taken this for so long now, and they keep taking it. And it started, started with season passes. And when season passes first appeared, you got one or two here and there, and they were like a 10 or 15 quid or whatever. And, we didn't like it, but it was only one or two games. And now every game has got a season pass, or nearly every game. Titanfall, not Titanfall 2. Thank you, Titanfall 2. You haven't got season pass, have they?
No, they basically said they're going to give away all the content for free. Afterwards.
Yeah, so go out and buy that game because...
Well, they better because the game's failing.
Well, yeah, I know it's failing, and to a certain extent...
It's a bit sad that the one game that hasn't got a season pass is performing the worst.
The irony there is there's probably some gamers out there looking at it and going, it hasn't got a season pass. I'm not buying that.
I think you're right. Yeah. They might be looking at it in a negative way because they look at the perceived value of the game and they think, well, if it hasn't got a season pass, it can't be worth very much.
Exactly.
When in actual fact, the game is actually pretty good, but it's been neglected because, obviously we talked about it before, the issues with it being released when it was and getting lost. But I don't know. I mean, I think you're right to the extent gamers are bending over and taking it far too much. And, I think the thing with DLC is if you look at a company like CD Projekt Red and how they handled The Witcher 3, they gave away so much free content with that game, and the DLC that they actually give you is almost enough content for another game in itself. Because if you look at the Game Awards this year, Blood and Wine, which is an expansion, actually won Best RPG, and that's a piece of DLC. It's not actually a full game, but it's 40 hours of content. Because they're a company that aren't cynical in how they treat gamers, but Capcom are. Aren't they?
It's like a principle thing, isn't it? When you buy a game, you want to think that you're being treated fairly. So you go out and buy a game. A friend of mine, we were talking about this. We constantly talk about this. You go out and you buy a game, and you spend 50 quid or whatever it might be on the game, and you play the game and you have a good time with it, and you put in X number of hours for it, and you get to the end of it and you've really enjoyed it. And then 6 months down the line, because in that time while you've been playing the game, the developers have been working on the DLC, the add-on content, and then they release the add-on content, and then you pay it if you want to, and you think, okay, that's value added. I don't mind paying for that because they've been working on it since the game came out. What we're seeing though is they've already got the DLC ready, and it is in effect withheld content. And in this, they've just taken it the next stage. They've said basically, oh well, we're not even going to give you the ending. That'll be DLC, and it's taking the piss.
It is taking the piss because
when you buy a book and you find the last chapters missing,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you think about what's the other point I was going to make? I mean, DLC should be an extension to the game. I mean, the whole point of DLC is it should add value, and it should tell another story that wouldn't otherwise be able to be put in the final game. So it should be like a complementary piece of the game. It shouldn't be
like Left Behind,
like
a
missing.
Last of Us.
Yes, exactly. It shouldn't be a missing part of the game, like you put in like a jigsaw piece, just to complete the picture.
Just out of curiosity, have Capcom responded to this? Have they given any reason or tried to validate it?
I haven't seen anything personally yet. I mean, I'm not saying that they might have done. I mean, it's quite possible, but I don't know if there's been any official response from them yet. But
if we find anything, we'll just put the
yeah,
link down below.
we'll
so
add it
people
on
can go
because
read
obviously it will flesh out sort of the subject, a little bit more. But yeah.
This story's probably going to continue, isn't it? So be interesting to find out what happens. Hopefully they'll backtrack, but I can't see that happening.
It depends how big the backlash is, isn't it? I mean, they're painting themselves into a corner, and they've been there before. They've been on financial rocky ground before, and shit like this will send them straight back to that same ground.
Yeah.
It's just, it's madness. It's ridiculous.
It makes you wonder who's making decisions at Capcom,
Yeah, they've done decisions like, I can't bring any here at the moment because I can't remember them off the top of my head, but they've done shit like this before, and I throw them in the same basket as Konami and guys like the same studios like those. They're just shady, greedy practices. I mean, I don't think everybody's going to try push these boundaries and adopt these same shady practices, but
no.
We're certainly going to see other people jump on this similar bandwagon. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see EA take a stab at this, or someone like those guys take a stab at this.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
I mean, they've got a big release with Resident Evil 7 coming soon, so it'd be interesting to see what they do with that in terms of the DLC for that game, because that's a big release for them. There's a lot of hype around that game, especially with all of it being playable in VR. It's one of the first big titles to be fully playable in VR. So, they've got, if they're going to earn the goodwill back from gamers, then, they better start doing it with how they treat that game, as far as I can see. Because
They'll probably release it as Resident Evil 6.5 and make you pay extra for the extra 5.5.
Yeah, you've actually got to pay for the VR feature, even though it's VR exclusive.
It'll be like Game in the UK charging £5 to use like the VR unit. Capcom will say, well, yeah, you can pre-order this game, but we'll give you 15 minutes for 20 quid, or I don't know. They'll just come up with something ridiculous,
Pay to play in the most profound way. Yeah.
Anyway,
pay by the hour. Yeah.
Any way to wring more money out. Any way to wring more money.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys have got any other comments you wanted to make on that.
I mean, no, not really. I can say some swear words if you want to.
Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. Fuck you, Capcom, and the horseshoe rode in on. Yeah.
So we could get
basically.
We could get another hashtag instead of fuck Konami, it'd be fuck Capcom this time.
Yeah, basically.
So we're starting it here today.
Yeah,
Fuck
we're going to start Capcom. A trend on Average Gamer.
Start a petition.
Yeah, exactly. Start a petition.
Free the DLC.
Exactly. Free that goddamn DLC. It's trapped. It's trapped inside a Capcom disc. Help! Help! I'm surrounded by Street Fighter characters. Okay.
Oh shit.
So yeah, let's move on then. The second subject we were going to talk about was, I think, Sully's, which was what path will VR need to take in the future if it's going to be successful? Is that more or less what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, no, that's basically in a nutshell. Because in my head, there's probably two paths that VR is going to take before I think it becomes even remotely mainstream or adopted by the masses. Because at the moment, you look at it, it's so fractured. I mean, we've got every man and his dog developing and releasing VR headsets. And there's no standard for the software being playable on all of these headsets. Like you would, for example, a TV. You buy any TV, you're going to be able to play any gaming console on it or any game or movie. It's a non-issue. VR at the moment isn't even remotely close to that, at least as far as content playback goes. So in my mind, the content's either going to be developed so it is playable on all of these systems, or if we see it stay and remain in its current state, we're basically going to see a lot of these systems die off because they can't get the software, and it's going to boil down to either one or two major players. Now, you could argue at the moment that Vive and Oculus and PSVR are the major players at the moment. Unless the software opens up and you can play it on anything, I'm pretty sure we're going to see a mass extinction. Yeah. Maybe not in the near future, but it's going to happen. I mean, we see it happen with formats all the time. I mean, look at HDD, DVD, and Blu-ray, and the Betamax and VHS, and the wars between MP3 and CD and tape. We've seen it happen before.
Definitely, we have.
It's going to happen because it can't exist in this current fractured state. Nobody's going to go out and buy when they do become more affordable, even nobody's going to go out and buy a system if they're not sure what software is coming to it, or if you buy an Oculus, you're not sure if you're going to be able to play the game that's developed for the Vive.
Yeah,
that might be where Scorpio comes in, because if we do get the deal that looks like it might be on the cards between Oculus and Microsoft, and we do get Oculus maybe bundled with the Scorpio, then we could end up in a situation where you can get the Oculus, you can play it on your PC, you can play it on your Xbox. The thing there is, will you have crossplay between those games? And that remains to be seen. I mean, we've already seen, going back to Dead Rising 4, we've seen everyone's talking about crossplay. Well, Dead Rising came out and I was expecting it to be crossplay, and it's not. And so we've got so far we've got 4 games or something with crossplay. Now, if that happens with Oculus on the Xbox and with PC, so you're getting some games on PC, some on Xbox, and there's no crossover between them, then that's not going to help. If you do get that crossplay, then it may open it up a bit more.
I believe they will unify it, because it seems their whole goal and intention is to unify those two platforms. And I think if you roll VR into it, they'll unify it. They have to.
I think that's absolutely logical.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, if you consider that PlayStation has its own proprietary system, you can't expect Microsoft not to make some sort of deal with regards to either. I mean, Oculus is the most logical one, isn't it? Looking at it. I mean, I don't personally. I mean, you mentioned Betamax VX. You mentioned all these history lessons we've had with regards to technology, and when they're in like a battle for supremacy, it's normally the consumer will decide, or I mean, in the case of VHS and Betamax, I think it was the porn industry, wasn't it, that proved to the success of VHS, because
I think you're right. Yeah.
That I remember reading something about it. I mean, that was a bit of a kind of freak example in regards to that. But sometimes the consumer will decide what's the simplest, solution for me.
Never underestimate the power of porn.
That's exactly right.
Not PlayStation, then.
Unless you're talking about Fallout 4. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the statistics about when Fallout 4 launched, did you, regarding Pornhub?
Oh, yeah, no, I heard about that.
I read something about that,
There was a massive dip, wasn't there, in the visits to Pornhub?
Massive dip in Pornhub traffic when Fallout 4 released. And I think it was at about 1 a.m. in the morning when people burnt out on Fallout, it spiked, it skyrocketed. So obviously people went and watched some porn and went to bed.
They got frustrated after playing Fallout. I think it was pretty...
Frustrated by all the bugs, yeah.
Oh, shit, my character lost all my possessions. Quick, go to Pornhub. So I just wonder, is it going to end up like I mentioned earlier, which was the PC licensing model, which is where basically you get manufacturers making essentially one VR unit for the home, which is like the personal computer that's compatible. If it runs Windows, for instance. So are we going to end up with that kind of model? Because I think what you said earlier is correct. I think the market even now is too crowded, and I think in order to fully benefit the consumer, we need just one system, and we need a standard. Standard, generic, sort of homogenized system of VR. Because, like I said, otherwise the consumer won't go for it, because they'll just.
Well, we're stuck in the middle now. We're literally stuck in the middle, and with the consumers yet to decide a path. And I think you're right. We will ultimately decide which way it's going to go, but I feel like it's even progressing even slower now, because of VR by nature is an accessory and it's peripheral. It's not a necessity like upgrading to the new format of video or a TV or something like that. So I think it's happening even slower.
It's VR at the moment is for enthusiasts. It's for technology enthusiasts. It's not hit the mainstream because of its price and the fact that it is a peripheral. Like you say, it's not essential. It's not like a TV is essential. It's not like a computer is essential. That's not to say that it couldn't hit, like you say, this mainstream model where you have people making one system, all these different manufacturers licensing one VR system. I think that's the best route to go from a consumer perspective. But whether that will actually happen, don't know.
Oculus backtracked on that though, didn't they? Because when they were first mooted release, they were talking about it being interoperable
Open
between
platform.
exactly. And so then it came out, and obviously I don't know whether this is to do with the fact that they paired themselves with Facebook, and Facebook wanted to lock it down, but a lot of people were getting very annoyed about it, and that kind of killed Oculus a little bit.
It was a Kickstarter promise, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah. And so, that created a lot of bad feeling for Oculus. And so Vive's kind of picked up from that a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
But people aren't going to go out and buy it if they're not sure what they can. Well, you've said this already. What they can play on it. What's going to be available. And when there's promises made and then those promises are backtracked on down the line, it makes it even more uncertain for the consumer. You're not going to go out and buy stuff if you're not sure what's going to go on.
No, absolutely.
Case in point, it's exactly what we saw with HD, DVD, and Blu-ray.
Yep.
People wouldn't invest in a platform because they weren't sure where the studios lied with their allegiances to the format.
Yeah, and the studios didn't exactly make it clear either, did they? They,
No,
so they caused
not.
this almost long drawn out kind of death of this one format, which we saw with HD DVD, and then suddenly it went from, these titles and these movies being released in the shops and then being in a bargain bin discount, like a couple of weeks later, because Blu-ray had effectively. It's sort of won by default almost. I don't really know what happened, but it just sort of nobody was really interested in HD DVD.
I think there in some respects, I think that Blu-ray won out simply because it had much better marketing.
Yeah.
Because I had both systems, and when it first came out, I would say that HD DVD was actually the more finished system. Blu-ray was still fucking about with standards and stuff.
It was, but wasn't. I believe Blu-ray was technically superior as well.
Yeah,
wasn't
it was,
at least
I think.
marginally technically superior.
Yeah.
Because it was uncompressed versus compressed on HD.
There wasn't much in it.
I think that was one of the big arguments.
It was more to do with
all.
what the capabilities were in terms of, I think, the layers that were available, if I remember rightly. I mean, it's coming off the top of my head, but that was theoretical. Actually, when it actually came out, there wasn't a great deal to choose between them in terms of what they are actually offering in terms of capacity and what you could put on the discs.
No, one last interesting side note when you talk about the battle between Blu-ray and HD DVD was a big turning point could have been the fact that Blu-ray was included with the PS3.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a good point, actually. Wasn't there an HD DVD add-on for the 360 that you could get?
Yeah.
There was, yeah. It was pricey though.
Yeah, and that's it's not as difference between that and something being an integral part of the machine, isn't there? I mean, that's a fundamental difference in itself.
It's handy to have though. Once they released the software for it as well for PC, so you could then rip HD DVDs, which I've done.
Purely for personal use. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
This kind of dovetails into maybe what we're seeing now with VR, with PlayStation adopting creating their own VR, and Microsoft adopting. It's pretty much a given that they're going to pick up Oculus. Yep. Could this be the turning point, like it maybe was for HD DVD and Blu-ray? Like, is this now where we see one become more dominant, being PSVR and Oculus? Do they kill off everything else now?
I think
because they've essentially tapped into a mainstream kind of device and market, haven't they?
Well, I think you're right. I think what could happen is we could get a filtering down of, like you say, you could get Vive pushed out a little bit, because you've got, obviously Sony have got their proprietary system with their own PSVR, and then assuming that what happens with Oculus with the Scorpio happens, you've essentially got a choice of two systems. I could see Vive being pushed out quite easily in that kind of model, in that sort of reckoning, and we might get a similar experience to what happened with Blu-ray and HD DVD. Like you say, they might be a battle that goes on, and it might come down to whether the Scorpio, for instance, when it's released, how much of a market share the system can gather. My only fear is that the Scorpio might splinter the existing Xbox market, considering they've just released the One S, and then not long ago was the first Xbox. So it's an interesting time. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Scorpio, actually, what it will do to the market.
I think the other thing as well is where's the price point going to be? Because if you look at the Scorpio is going to be, a premium product, and I did read some stuff the other day where Microsoft were intimating that maybe it's not going to be quite as expensive as people were thinking. But,
Damage control.
well, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen until we actually see the price. Who knows? But when you consider that Oculus is somewhere around about the £700 mark, something like that.
It's about that, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, if they're going to,
how expensive is a bundle going to be?
Yeah, exactly. You're talking, in excess of £1,000. So how many people are going to be able to go and buy that? And you're ending up with Connect all over again, and the bundle situation there. Where people weren't buying it simply because it was £100 more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And less powerful.
Yeah, powerful. Yeah.
I mean, they might do some deal where if they are going to bundle the Oculus Rift with the Scorpio, then you might get it a bit cheaper, but they can't make a loss on the actual unit, on the Oculus unit, because it's so expensive to manufacture in the first place.
Yeah.
And Microsoft will probably not want to take a loss on the Scorpio because if you're going to be selling a brand new system at a loss, what sort of signal does that send out?
Well, then again, the PS3 and the Xbox 360 were both sold at losses, I believe.
They were marginal losses,
considerable amount of time.
Yeah, but then they made it up with software. But I think
it depends how much confidence you've got in your software sales, doesn't it?
If
you think you're going to make it back, then it's worth doing.
Yeah, because Sony make a profit on the PSVR unit at the moment, which and they make a profit on the PS4. So it'd be interesting. I don't know where we'll end up, but I have a feeling, it could be a battle between two units, like you say.
It's a shame because I've heard.
Who knows?
Sorry, I was just saying it's a shame because I've heard that the Vive's actually a pretty good system, but that could explain the rationale behind closing down the Oculus a little bit. It gives them a bit more control of the market, especially if it becomes bundled with the Xbox. Yeah. And then it really is squeezing out the Vive.
Well, I don't think the Vive is necessarily doomed to death if, we do see these two VR units succeed on console. I mean, they've still got the backing of the Steam store.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think it's certainly not inevitable. It's a good system. But what you've also got to look at with the Vive, I think the Vive is slightly more complex to set up and use, which I think counts against it a little bit in terms of how much mass market penetration it could get. Because you still require a decent PC system to run it.
Yeah, and not to mention, if it is constricted to the PC platform in general is more of an enthusiast market, and I'd probably argue that, I haven't got nothing to back this up. It's off to my head that probably there's more gamers on consoles than there are PC.
Yeah, I would say there were, quite considerably more. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what an average PC game sells, for instance, but I know that you mentioned Fallout 4 earlier, and that sold like something ridiculous in the first 24 hours, didn't it? And that was that was a lot on PC, is what I'm saying, compared to console. So, it's not to say Vive, I wouldn't like to see Vive die out because I think it's a good system, but like you say, the market tends to dictate what wins in the end.
At the moment, we're at, I think, still in the early stages.
Yeah.
But it's not sustainable. We're going to see a mass extinction event, and then it's going to boil down to, we're going to come back to the beginning where we just basically had one or two systems and they're going to win out depending on how they're positioned. And I think you look at the Facebook and Oculus deal with Microsoft, it's going to happen. Like, Microsoft will not go forward without having their own VR system. It's going to happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I think once you've, like you said earlier, once you've tapped into a console, either being Sony or Microsoft, you've almost hit the home run. Because you've got Microsoft backing it, and you've got the developers which are already developing exclusive software for those systems.
Yeah.
The idea of cross-play in a VR system is quite exciting to me as well, because I think it'll really explode in terms of development then, perhaps. I think it's going to be a little while. We've already talked about this before, that we haven't really seen anything significant in terms of software yet for VR. There's some interesting stuff, but nothing that goes, you've got to have this.
Yeah.
And I think that, if we see that next year or maybe the year after, and you've got this with the Scorpio coming online, and you've got, Oculus bundled with it, or, as an add-on for it that you can use on your Scorpio and on your PC, and cross-play with those games, then it starts to look like a really attractive proposition.
Yeah. I think once we start seeing those recognizable franchises hit VR, like, for example, for me, if Scorpio comes out and Halo 6 comes out, with Scorpio support, bang, I'm there. I don't care how much it costs. I would spend $1,500. I don't care.
Yeah.
There's no amount of money that would stop me from playing. There's no amount of money that would stop me from getting that. Obviously, I have certain requirements you'd have to meet. I don't want to be looking around. I don't want to have that jaggy movement feeling. I just want to be inside the Chief's helmet, and I want his helmet to cover my peripheral vision, and that's it. I just want it to be a screen that covers my peripheral vision. That's it. And I just want to hold the controller. I want to play. If that happens, I'm basically going to bend over. I'm going to tip my wallet out onto the ground and just say, take all my money.
Yeah. Your marketing burst and corporate company's wet dream, I think, by the sounds of it. Give him Master Chief. Throw it at him, yeah.
Give me Master Chief.
Yeah,
take me Master Chief.
I'm just thinking if there's a game that I would do that for. I don't think there is, but well, maybe The Last of Us Part 2, but I doubt they were just going to release it in VR somehow.
No, but that's what it's missing though. It's missing those killer apps.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah,
or the recognizable apps at least. It hasn't got any of that.
You've got a lot of bite-sized games, haven't you? Like quick, short one experiences, like an hour or so, like that Batman game and Job Simulator and games like that. But it's not got anything that's like a killer, AAA sort of meaty title.
Yeah, and I think now that it is on the consoles, especially with PSVR, and I think once Oculus probably hits the Scorpio, I think, once we start getting into that, then we start to see, those recognizable franchises hit VR, and VR starts to become a more attractive and appealing item. I mean, I think at the moment, you could argue that PSVR should already have those franchises available in VR, but I honestly believe it's a technical limitation and it's a power issue with the PlayStation. I don't think they're powerful enough to put Uncharted 4 in VR. It's a technical issue.
I think you're right.
I don't think we'll see that till the PS5 or Scorpio.
I think you're right. I think it's hard enough generating what it does at the moment.
I was just going to say, do you remember when they were talking about Vive, when they were talking about the Vive coming out, and there was all these rumours going around about we were going to get Half-Life VR. Did you hear any of that? There was all this talk that, Half-Life's going to come out as a VR game and it's going to be a big thing. And
well,
nothing.
Valve might have missed the boat. I mean, that would have been the perfect opportunity to see Half-Life yet again pioneering, a new way of gaming. Or
Half-Life Free Believe.
It would have been amazing. It would have been. People would have been like, well, people certainly in my generation, the jaw would have been on the floor. I would have. Well, you say about bending over and opening your wallet and saying, take my money. That would have been that for me. It would have been like, I'm buying a PC. I didn't have a PC at the time when that was announced. I would have been like, right, how much money have I got? I'm going to buy a PC, I'm going to buy a Vive, and I'm going to buy Half-Life 3 or Half-Life VR or whatever they were going to call it. And that would have been a done deal for me because, I have built PCs in the past for a particular game. It's not something new for me.
I've done that actually.
Yeah, there's loads of people who've done that. And if you come out with a killer app like that, basically the market's there for you, but there's nothing there. If we keep going over the same ground, I suppose, but they just haven't released anything that makes you salivate like that makes you just want to say, take my money. This is what I'm waiting for.
Yeah, and it's probably in line with the way, with the current market penetration being sort of relatively low, we probably won't see that title for a while, until it builds up some momentum. But then, like we say, the whole point of this discussion is to see where it's going to end up, because we don't know.
No,
it'd be interesting. Be interesting to see where it does.
But who knows? I mean, we could be completely wrong. VR might completely die when Nintendo Switch comes out and everybody drops VR and they want to build a Nintendo Switch.
That's true. Yeah. That's definitely likely to. Anyway,
that's
hold on a minute. I just got to go and hook the pink elephant out my bathroom.
Sorry, there's just a pig flying past the window. There was some announcement about the Switch, I think, earlier today. There's a presentation on 13th of January about it.
Switch VR. Switch fitness. Sorry.
That's maybe a future episode topic. Switch VR. Who knows?
I'm fairly sure the only way you can get in contact with Nintendo is if you write them in mail. I don't think they know what the internet is. I think there's a lot of things they've failed to embrace. So I think you should write into them, Joe.
They don't know what
I reckon.
No,
maybe they're developing some of those games that you used to have back in the past, where you sort of write to people what you're doing next, and you send it in the post, and then they do the next bit, and then you send it in the post. I think there's a future there for Nintendo. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a future there for Nintendo. They've definitely missed the market chance there.
I think we've covered that subject and gone off on a few
And
tangents. And Nintendo, yeah. If you didn't actually,
Again,
if you're tuning in and you know, this is a bonus segment on Nintendo that we're just talking about. So the final topic that we were going to talk about, which is an interesting one, is Joe's, which is identity politics and its impact on the gaming community. So take it away, Joe.
okay, yeah, this is well, it's just a bit loose on this because there's
Disable the comment section.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not going there. You've thrown me off now. Let's see. Yeah, I've been looking at the conference, the PSX, the other day, a couple of weeks back now, and the thing that struck me, and I've been looking at these for a few years now, and every time I watch them, I think to myself, this is like a bloody cult. This is like, or one of those pyramid selling things where everybody who comes on stage is cheered and whooped. And, you know, if you get Sean Layden comes on and everybody, you know, is clapping. And I swear, if the guy dropped his trousers and took a dump on the stage, they'd still clap and whoop.
Sorry.
And, you know... It's funny and everything, but then you listen to what they're saying, and it's just kind of market speak and all this kind of stuff, and people are lapping it up, and you know, you look at people's eyes and it's like they love this guy. They're in, and it's the first person I really saw this with was Steve Jobs from Apple.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know, I was saying this to you before we started, that we started off with the kind of lifestyle marketing. And then it kind of moved away from that and it moved on. And this is the kind of next progression whereby these companies are trying to make us buy into not just the product, but the company itself.
Yeah.
You know, where we're investing ourselves in it, almost like, and I've touched on this before, almost like a religion, like some religious cult that we become utterly invested in.
Yeah.
And that leads into the fanboy thing, where people are arguing over the most ridiculous stuff. Like, you know, I had one guy the other day when I was doing the thing on the PS4 Pro, and I happened to mention, which was you mentioned to me, Grant, that when I did the unboxing, it looked like there was a speck or dirt or something on the actual front of the console.
That was me.
And it was actually,
Sully.
oh, was it you, Sully? Sorry.
Yeah.
And what it was actually the on button and the eject button. And I mentioned this in the video, and this guy got really upset about it, you know, and he started going on about how it was, you know, there's nothing wrong with the console and it's a perfect console and everything. I'm thinking, I only happened to mention it in passing. It wasn't a big deal. And, you know, so we've got these people investing so much into a piece of plastic, and I think it's an element of the whole identity politics that we get on the net generally, you know, where people have to belong to this group, and anyone else who doesn't belong to that group and doesn't hold with that viewpoint is an outsider and has to be kind of shunned. So
I honestly believe it comes down to human nature a bit, because you look at people that join these groups, and especially in real life, like cults and religious groups and stuff, they're looking for a place to belong.
Yeah.
And I think that can translate easily over to anything, you know, especially like gaming related stuff like PlayStation and Xbox, especially when you're having so much advertising being pumped down your throat as well. It just kind of amplifies it even more.
I think actually, just to sort of what you were saying about people feeling really invested in the company, you know, I think what Sully's saying is true. They do want to belong, and also they have such. What's happened is, as society's become more secular and less religious, they almost need an outlet for their energies, because they don't have that spiritual outlet that they would have through religion. What you're finding is that they will attach themselves to these corporations and ultimately to these brands. So you've got this effect that Apple proliferated, where people become so invested in the brand that they become evangelists for that brand, and if you dare to attack it, they get very, very defensive, because they've invested so much of their own personality into that brand that they feel incredibly insecure if you attack that brand, because it feels like you're attacking them. because what their corporation's done is they've manipulated them with marketing in order to...
It's designed to do that.
In order to create this army of evangelists. So eventually the product sells itself because people just talk about it to their friends, and then they talk about it to their workmates, and then it proliferates. So
Apple, perfect example.
Apple don't need to advertise because everyone advertises their products by waving them around every few minutes, you know. So it's the same with and all the PSX thing is an extension of that. You know, you have people that will support Xbox or Sony or Nintendo, and
Nintendo is, in my opinion, probably another perfect example. Similar to Apple, like Nintendo can do nothing wrong in the eyes of
Nintendo.
In the eyes of the true
so
believers.
Loyal. It's way bigger than Sony or Microsoft.
They're very, very sort of fiercely loyal Nintendo fanboys. You know,
there's clear mistakes and limitations to Nintendo products as there are with Apple, especially Apple.
Yes.
Especially in the past with Apple products. Yet you bring those issues up to an Apple fan, and it's like you're trying to convince a Christian that God doesn't exist. You know, it just falls on deaf ears. It doesn't even acknowledge.
Yes.
You talk through them. You know,
you talk about identity politics. The fact is, the corporation wants to own your identity, and that's how they own your identity. They own it by effectively marketing the product to you, building up that enthusiasm, and then they're almost taking back your identity because you've willingly invested it in their company. So they become sort of like, it becomes such a symbiotic relationship but it's a slave relationship, because
that's interesting actually, because it's you said willful there, and it's like a willful giving up of your critical faculty.
Yeah, it is. That's because it's a process that occurs through this whole marketing machine. That's, you know, it's very deliberate, and it's very kind of carefully manipulative on the behalf of the company. They know exactly what they're doing because they're using psychological techniques in order to get people attached to this brand. Because once they're attached, it's unlikely that they're going to detach themselves unless something happens in order to
something bigger or better.
Yeah. And that's where there's another parallel as well, because those people who do detach from that brand, they're treated very much like somebody leaving the fold in a religious community.
Like outcasts.
They're shunned. You know, you talk about, people talk about flip-floppers and and traitors and I've heard all this. Yeah, exactly. Heard all this kind of language that's being used about people who have just decided that actually I prefer the PlayStation now to the Xbox, or the other way round. You know.
I'm not a fucking flip-flopper. I've just made a choice and a decision which I believe benefits me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly right. But that's because you've got critical faculty, whereas these guys haven't. You know, you're able to make a decision and a choice based on what is best for you, and you don't have to impose that on other people in order to enjoy it. You can enjoy it quite happily on your own, or playing with your friends or whatever. You don't have to force everybody in your family to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's it.
But if you are someone,
everyone eat carrots.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I in the past I used to ask people, well, why have you got an iPhone? This is before I got, I've got one myself, but it's an older model, so I'm not exactly an evangelist for Apple. I would say to them, well, why did you buy an iPhone? And some people would say, the most common answer I had was, well, I don't know. My friends have got one. It seems like a decent phone. They don't really have a proper reason why they...
I've asked that question many times myself, and the reasons I usually get boils down to aesthetics.
Yeah.
And they've been told it's easy to use.
They've been told it's easy to use, except they've been told, Is that their actual experience of it, though?
No,
and it might be.
They don't have an opinion on it. They're just being led. I'll never forget what really kind of blew my mind up was when I think it was the last iPhone that came out, and it had that issue where it would bend.
Supposedly, I'm not sure if that was actually true.
Well, no, I'd seen him firsthand. I'd seen like people that I worked with had him, and he actually showed me his bent iPhone. They used to say, it only happened if you wore skinny jeans or if you put it in your back pocket, it'd bend. But no, my mate just had it in his side pocket, loose jeans, it bent. it bent. You know, I'd seen a few of them at work, and I'll never forget, like, people that were talking about buying this phone. I'm like, you know, it has an issue where it bends, right? Like, its chassis isn't strong enough. It bends relatively easy if you even accidentally sit on it. But no, it didn't seem to matter. These guys had all the previous phones.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to matter. They didn't care. They're like, well, I just have to be careful with it then. I have to be careful. I'm like, well, don't buy it. Just
it's
stop.
like they filter out the
Stop.
negative stuff because they've been brainwashed by the brand.
They somehow reasoned. They kept every person. They reasoned it away somehow,
Yeah.
and they pushed aside the negative and they pushed on and they bought it.
What do you mean it's bent? It's got a curved screen. It's all the rage now.
It's like
Oh.
it's like it's like you're talking about a religious cult leader, you know, but he's a sexual deviant, you know, he has sex with all these different women. No, he's just he's spreading the spiritual light through, you know, his copulation or something. They'll make up some excuse as to why, you know,
Through his holy fluids.
through his holy fluids. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'm sorry if anyone's religious here. I apologize. But
yeah.
But you get this. Actually, you get the same look in going back to the conferences again. You get the same look in people. You know, you get that look when you get the religious nut who stops you on the street and is trying to sell you one of his Bibles or whatever,
Yeah.
and he won't let you go. And he's got that kind of look in his eyes, like he knows something you don't. And he's kind of the world's.
That's crazy.
You know? Yeah, it's a crazy look. It's the same look you get in the eyes of crazy people, and you get that in the eyes of some of the people at these conferences, and they're looking up like they're in love with something. Like what? They're in love with the black box that's just been shown on stage, or the phone, or or whatever it might be. And you just think,
I think that's to do with hype as well. Like, I've talked about the hype train a lot. You know, they advertise these reveal events so much, and obviously the people that are going to these events are already passionate about these products and brands.
Yeah.
And they get off the hype train at this event. Like, that's the pinnacle, the climax of the hype.
I mean, the event do their best to hype the people up as well because of the way they create that whole atmosphere to make it, you know, like conducive to sort of this hype, sort of, you know, this hype atmosphere. They create it within the conference hall is what I'm trying to say. So it's kind of like a generated kind of fake atmosphere where it's like when they used to when you go to a gig, for like a comedy gig, you know, you get like a warm-up person or something. You know, they get the crowd going deliberately so that, you know, it appears that the main act is more successful or funnier or wittier or whatever. So the crowd are more responsive. But it's true, you know, the people themselves are responsible for building up hype with games. You know, they do it through these events. If you watch these events, and there's a whole sort of cult that's built up around people reacting to watching games. It's like a second-hand industry where people get, you know, it's like they get enthusiastic themselves watching people at a conference get enthusiastic about the next Last of Us game, or, you know, I got excited about that. Yeah, but I wasn't whooping and hollering when I heard it was going to be released like some sort of rabid dog.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
and
you knew it was inevitable, and this was just the excitement because it's finally come.
Exactly. Yeah.
Losing your mind like a fangirl at a Beatles concert.
But why do we build up all this hype around games? You know, but it makes you wonder, because it's partly why we've got this issue with games like No Man's Sky. That was hyped to death, and there was no good reason for it. Yeah,
and there was the guy who came up with gave out the information about it was going to be delayed. Do you remember this story? The guy actually
got burned.
Yeah, he was getting death threats and all sorts.
That's right.
And all he did was basically break the story that No Man's Sky was going to be being the operative word, was going to be delayed.
Kotaku, wasn't it, or something like that? One of the journalists. On Kotaku?
I think you're right. Yeah, and it was insane. And what exactly did he do wrong? Yeah. It wasn't like he was even coming out and saying it's delayed because it's shit or something like that. You know, even then, I still wouldn't have understood the reaction. But if he'd have come out and said it's being delayed because, well, it's shit, then okay, people might have got upset with that, even though they'd not seen the game yet, so they didn't know whether it was shit or not. And if he'd seen it, then he might have a point, you know?
Yeah, in retrospect, he probably should have said that.
Exactly, yeah. But he
Probably
did.
should have just
shit.
put it on Steam and as a greenlight project or a early access.
We stirred it up. We stirred up the hornets' nest now. You wait.
Well,
No Man's Sky fans. They're going to be after us.
I think they've probably like the zealots who leave the fold, the apostates or whatever they're called. They're the ones who become the most vehement against it. So they're probably the ones who are actually shouting most about No Man's Sky now. Actually, the ones who are the ones who are most invested in it. You'll still get the hardcore who won't give up on it.
Sorry, Joe. I still get comments on my No Man's Sky video still claiming that Sean Murray's taken our money and he's now drinking cocktails on a beach somewhere. Even though he's returned, he's made tweets, he's working on the game, he's talked about the updates. No, he's taken our money and
he's not working on it.
Technically, he has taken our money, but he's working on the game at least.
And I have heard that the game's a lot better now, and I will go back and have a look at it myself and see what I think. It's not really my type of game anyway. But I admired the vision early on, and I liked the idea. Yeah, the fact that they were talking about things like the golden age of science fiction and being influenced by that was really exciting to me because that's an area that I'm really interested in, and so all that was really exciting to me. And even though I thought, well, it's not really my type of game, I'm not really into all that sort of management style stuff, I still thought, well, it's worth supporting it for that reason. So part of me still hopes that it does turn out to be a decent game, and it's looking like the most recent patch has actually made it a lot better than it was.
Yeah, the Foundation update. Ever be,
yeah, exactly. Which is an interesting name actually. Foundation, Arthur C. Clarke. Sorry, exactly. Asimov. Sorry, Foundation. Sorry, I'll get that.
That's right. Yeah, my dad was a sci-fi enthusiast.
It really was a game that should have been like an early access model.
I think you're right. I mean, it makes me wonder why. Sony are partly responsible for putting it in, on the pedestal in the way they did in terms of the hype train.
I think Sony have got a lot to answer for there, actually.
Yeah, it makes you wonder why they do this sort of practice.
No, I made a video about a while ago how they were quite happy to stand by. There's no way they didn't know what state No Man's Sky was in.
Exactly.
Sean Murray and the team would have communicated to Sony like, this game isn't where we promised it was going to be at. And they were quite happy to stand by and let Sean Murray go off the rails. And then post-launch, they threw him under the bus and they distanced themselves from him, saying he didn't have a PR team. Like, well, fucking hang on. Shouldn't have you been his PR team?
I'm not being funny, but I think Shuhei Yoshida is responsible for a lot of that. I mean, he's head of the studios, and he would have known, he would have played that game prior to launch.
Yeah.
And, he's a pretty straightforward guy. He should have been a lot more forthright about the state of the game, but maybe he told them to release it. I don't know. You don't know exactly what was going on behind the scenes.
No, you don't.
With that game.
I think they just saw dollar signs and we'll patch this up when
it struck me as Machiavellian though, because you said earlier on that you wondered why Sony allowed this to happen, but it's like it's a no-brainer in a way. They push it, and if it turns out great, then they can get the glory. If it turns out shit, they just say, well, it was his fault.
Yeah, they stand back and wipe their hands of the whole thing, and say,
exactly.
Whoa, yeah,
so they can't lose in a way, can they? Because okay, we're heaping some shit on them now, but the fact of the matter was, the person who got the vast majority of the flack over this was Sean Murray.
Yeah,
it constantly reminds me of Peter Molyneux and Fable. I just always come back to it. It just fascinates me because, like you mentioned before about people being able to build hype or sell anything like Steve Jobs. Peter Molyneux, in my mind, is like the ultimate final form version of a person like that. Like he could polish a turd and tell you a magical story about it, and you'd buy it, and it wouldn't be till months later that you realize you have a piece of shit.
And boy, did he weave some fucking tales!
It was incredible, and yet he still, for the time that he spent with the Microsoft studio, I think it was Lionhead.
That's right, yeah.
Time after time and after time again. I mean, yes, it did get progressively better, from Fable 1 to 3 with his promises. He did rein himself in a bit as the series went on. But at least with number 1, he promised so much that never came to fruition.
Yeah, but he would go to these conferences and he would talk about features, and the devs would go, "What's he talking about? That's not in the game."
Yes, and this is exactly like Sean. It's exactly like Sean Murray's. I guarantee Hello Games were going, "Fuck me, please stop, please."
Stop opening your mouth. It's got multiplayer. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I don't know if it's like it's the time that we live in. Maybe like everything's so more transparent and it gets around quicker on the internet, and flame wars start up quicker than what it was when maybe Fable 1 came out. Like maybe if Fable 1 came out today and Peter Molyneux was spitting all these dreams and magical fairy tales, maybe he'd be in the same boat. I don't know, but I just don't understand how he kind of got away with it, yet Sean Murray's his career's probably over. I don't think we're going to see him again after No Man's Sky.
I don't know that Peter Molyneux did get away with it because he lost. I mean, I would recommend you go and watch that 4-part documentary that I mentioned before on him.
I watched that.
You did? Because
I watched that, yeah.
Part of that, what was said in that documentary was he lost a lot of his key developers that were working on Fable because they got fed up with him after a while.
Yeah.
And also, he basically lied through the whole Kickstarter campaign of Goddess. He took nearly £500,000 from people and did not release a finished game. So effectively, he's taken people's money, and I think he's finished. Effectively, he isn't really working in the game industry, not directly. He's working for Microsoft, I think, in some capacity. And what that
when I said like he got away with it, I meant more immediately after with the Fable series, where he's going to lead into the whole 22 cans debacle, because he kind of disappeared for a little while after Fable. When he left, and I can't remember where he went. I think he didn't immediately go into the 22 cans project. I think he was doing something else in between. But then it kind of
he was like head of Microsoft Studios for a little while in Europe.
And then it kind of after it kind of everything kind of his bad ways and habits that he'd built up just blew up in his face completely.
Absolutely.
I think that might be something to do with maybe working with a smaller team as well. Obviously, working with Lionhead on a game like Fable, like they delivered a much more final package and cohesive package than what No Man's Sky was. But then you put Peter Molyneux in a smaller team, which have clear limitations. He's overpromised, and he's with a team that can't deliver.
Yeah, it's a tiny studio, Hello Games, and yet their game was hyped to the extent where it was almost treated like a AAA game, but it was never going to be one. I mean, it's from a small studio with like how many people? This is what I don't get, you see.
Credit.
Yeah, I don't get that. I really don't understand.
Credit to the team, I think.
Yeah, it is credit to the team. The capability. I mean, technically, No Man's Sky is very impressive. I just personally found it
visually as well. It looks like a AAA title.
It does.
An indie AAA title.
It has this 60s, like Joe was saying, sci-fi aesthetic, which is really interesting. But I just found it really empty and dull to play. But that's not to say that they can't make it a good game, because they can. They can add to it, and it's like the Division now. The Division is getting this. It's just got this survival update, which has changed the game, and a lot of people are going back to it. But it's games can be. I know we're going off topic a little bit, but games can be rescued from sort of, because of the way the games industry works nowadays with patches. It's not like in the past with cartridges, where once you release the game,
people
that was it.
Games all the time.
Yeah. If you had...
And look at Evolve, like it went from a $60 game to it kind of died off because it had lacked content. The overall premise and idea of the game was fantastic, but because it was too expensive and it had limited content, it didn't sell, so it went free to play. And I don't know if that's necessarily helped. I know people that still play it, so it's still living.
It didn't actually so much evolve as devolve.
Yeah.
Good one. So is there anything else you wanted to cover on your subject?
No, I think that's fine for now. I think to be honest, it's a huge subject and we could go into a whole nother area with it, but that's basically what I wanted to talk about, because it's something that's been fascinating me, and I think it tied into the stuff with The Last of Us as well that happened the other day. But I could go into that. I've just finished doing a video on that, and it nearly killed me trying to do that, to be honest.
Is that on the announcement of the part 2 you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the response I saw. I won't go into too much detail because, like I said, I've done a video on it. But
sure.
I saw one specific response that really, really got me interested and got me talking about it, because I couldn't believe the reaction people were giving it. Oh, a girl. I'm going to be playing as a girl. I can't do that.
I mean, well, Sully covered it in his video, and then I've made my own comments on it. But it's interesting. We've all done a video on Last of Us, but I personally don't get. Why is it suddenly an issue to play as a girl? I mean, did people forget the Tomb Raider games, Metroid? I mean, we've been doing it for years. It's not like it's suddenly a big thing.
Because it's with a series that previously had a male lead, and now obviously, I think generally from my perspective anyway, you don't see many series change up its main character from who you play as.
But you did play as Ellie for a portion of the first game.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't disagree with you either, Grant. Like I mentioned in my video why I took issue with it, and I think I had valid reasons. Like, I'm certainly not a sexist, and I don't hate females at all.
No, I don't think you are, and you did put across quite well why. To be fair, why you had issues with it, and your issues were legitimate. Definitely.
Yeah, I didn't actually even necessarily, when I heard it, like, I was actually disappointed myself, and I didn't understand why until I actually really thought about it and dug into it a bit more.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people have taken issue with it, but they also don't understand why.
I don't know. I think to be honest, I think true fans of the series won't be bothered at all. But I think there are some people that might take issue with it because they've got their own issues personally with playing as women in games, and that's not really good. They're not going to be persuaded otherwise.
No, yeah, exactly. Which is what I covered in my video. I think that's a very negative positioning.
I haven't watched your video yet, Sully. I told you for because I didn't want to watch it before I finished my video.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just like a lot of these issues. You know, there will be valid reasons for not wanting to play as that character. And you just touched upon one of them with, you know, the idea that we're used to playing as Joel. We don't want to play as Ellie because we're used to playing as Joel. My counter to that would be briefly that, well, as you said, Grant, we did play as Ellie in the first game anyway, to some degree. But those are reasonable arguments, and we can talk about that, and that's fine. It's when people start coming out with things like it's a bloody communist conspiracy to feminize us.
Yeah, that just drives me up the wall. I'm sorry. I just think that's just fucking ridiculous.
What I want to finish with as far as like my issue with playing as Ellie was, like you mentioned, true fans of the series will be looking forward to playing number 2, whether you're Ellie or not, which I just want to make clear that's where I'm currently at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking forward to it. I want to play as Ellie now that I've had a chance to dive into it and think about it, because I think it offers a huge like design aspect that interests me. Like Naughty Dog themselves, I believe, dove into the fact that you're not going to be playing this game the same time that you were the first time around. I think it offers a very interesting future and path. I want to see where it's going to go rather than just playing as Joel again.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, I watched a little bit of the actual conference at PSX where Neil Druckmann and Ashley Johnson, I think, and Troy Baker, the voice actors, were sat in a panel. And Neil Druckmann said the first game was about love. It was about love between Joel and Ellie. You know, it was about how that love developed from this sense of mistrust because he didn't initially want to take her across, you know, the country, but eventually became so attached to her. You know the story. And then
actually had a game with a backstory and reasons for
exactly
and
motivations of characters. And I mentioned that in the comment
exactly.
on Sully's video. You know, the characters had certain motivations. The second game, he said, Neil Druckmann, is about hate because for whatever reason, you know, we got this little glimpse through the trailer of Ellie. Obviously, 4 years had passed, and you know, people were speculating whether Joel was actually dead or not. And I don't actually think he is, but I understand why they drew that conclusion from watching the trailer, because there's subtle hints at the way he appears sort of out of the light, for instance. I actually don't think, because I think that's too obvious. I don't think Naughty Dog would do that. But if it
take a lot of balls to kill off a character like that in a series,
it would take a huge amount
if you
of
wanted to
balls
reuse him
to
later.
do that. Absolutely. And I think because this game, you know, because of the way the first game ended, I'm not going to spoil it, but we all know how it ended. I think it's a natural progression to move on to Ellie's part of the story and her being the focus, because it's her journey almost from now on. You know,
passing on the baton and the torch.
And I always say,
be surprised. Sorry, go on, Frank.
I always say what they're doing. Naughty Dog always do things that make the most sense for the story. You know, they don't just deliberately do things out of some SJW or, you know, like communist conspiracy, you know, to feminize the world. You know, it's because they're doing it from the story, because they are about story and narrative. They're a studio that is very concerned with making games that are a cinematic narrative experience. That's what they do.
If they were so concerned about, you know, the whole social justice warriors movement and all this equality crap, would they have made a character like Nathan Drake, who's your cardboard cutout.
Yeah, he's Indiana Jones.
Superhero, white Caucasian male.
Exactly.
No, they wouldn't have. They're doing what they want to do.
Yeah. They got a hell of a lot of stick for, in The Last of Us's DLC with, the kiss between Ellie and, she happens to be a gay character. There's been gay characters in games before. Gone Home, it was all about that. So it's not like
Master Chief's gay. Spoilers.
You heard it here first, guys.
Oh my god! Quick!
Oh no, you've just lost Microsoft.
I don't want to make light of it, but you're right, Grant. You're right.
You've just lost Microsoft a whole load of people playing Halo now. You know that, don't you?
Exactly.
They're going to sue you. But the thing is, for me though, who cares really?
Yeah, exactly.
If the character's gay and there's a reason for that in the story, and if you look at that scene in Left Behind in The Last of Us, that scene is a really touching scene, and it gives you a whole load of backstory about Ellie, and
the whole DLC I just think is just brilliant piece of storytelling.
I think it is. I was playing it again today actually, and if you just look at that and you take it as story and you just accept it as a well-written piece of work, and don't kind of put all this other crap into it, then it's just a brilliantly written little vignette telling you about a character. And we get that so rarely in games. We should be celebrating it, not bloody getting annoyed about it.
Exactly, and you've hit the nail on the head. Naughty Dog stand out because they're one of the few developers that really, really care so much about story. And let's face it, the majority of stories in games are just fucking rubbish. They're not worth the paper they're written on. And you get a company which actually bothers to make the story the central point of the game, and and suddenly people forget that, or they push it to one side because they've got their own agenda, and they forget that this is a game company making the game that they want to make. At the end of the day, we should be grateful for the fact that they're making such brilliant games, to be honest.
Yeah, doing something different. It's like they're naturally embracing what's already been missing from video games anyway.
Yeah, they're trying to bridge the gap.
This kind of diversity
between movies and games.
And they're doing it because they want to do it. They're not doing it because they feel they have to.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, some people would argue that, but I think it's pretty clear when you look at Naughty Dog's history.
Just look at their track record.
Sorry, this is exactly the words I used in my video, actually. We're going over some of the ground in my video. I basically... No, it's fine. I'm quite happy to go over it again. And, I actually said in there, look at their track record. Do you think they've got a good track record? Do you think we should be giving them the benefit of the doubt? Yes, of course we should, because they've got a great track record, and let's wait and see what they deliver. And if it turns out to be shit then, which it won't, let's be honest, it's not going to be shit. Well, it sounded like a fanboy now, but the chances of it being utterly dire are pretty slim.
Confirmed.
I'll give you.
Joe is a Sony pony.
Yeah. Sony pony. Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna record that, and I'm gonna send it to my mates. I think I'm an Xbox fanboy.
It's like Neil Druckmann said: "Just trust us. We'll deliver the right story for you." And they haven't really let us down yet. So why should we believe they're going to now?
Yeah.
No, and they could take a misstep, but hey, that's part of the creative process.
Yeah, companies do. Yeah.
Oh, it's going to happen eventually. You can't stay up forever. You're going to have a misfire eventually.
Yeah, I saw a video on it or an article on it once. When it's something along the lines of when a Naughty Dog gonna fuck up, and it was like it's the shortest article ever. I mean, it's like they're not. Is the answer.
I don't know. Maybe if they decide to license and create Crash Bandicoot again. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the remastered's coming out, isn't it? So
that's true. Yeah.
If they go back to Jack and Daxter.
Well, it'd be actually, I'd be interested to see what they could do with a series like that now that they've had this kind of experience under the belt. I think could they flesh it out into something more,
it's an interesting
maybe
story.
More mature? I don't know.
I don't know if you know, but The Last of Us appeared because they were actually trying to make a Jack and Daxter game, and they were finding that they couldn't find the right tone. They tried to make it darker and more serious. And they initially started these design ideas for Jack and Daxter, and it turned out they ditched it entirely because they wanted to make a different game. And so Neil Druckmann came up with this idea from watching this BBC documentary about this sort of virus, cordyceps virus, that spreads between insects. And suddenly the whole thing gestated into The Last of Us. It's interesting. If you watch Grounded, the making of The Last of Us, it's on YouTube.
I'll have to check that out, actually.
It's really interesting. It's called Grounded. It's The Making of The Last of Us. It's a documentary.
That'd be really worth
We'll
watching.
link that down below in the description as well.
Yeah.
Great idea.
I've watched
I'm
it
going to have to pay attention to when I'm editing
a
this.
couple of times, and it's a really well done documentary, actually. But if you're interested in games...
But the gestation you described there of how he came about developing The Last of Us, or, obviously part of a team,
Yeah.
but how that came about, that doesn't sound like, a lot of game development. That sounds more like the sort of development you would get from somebody who was going to create a book or something like that, because it's a process that goes on outside of the pressures to produce a product.
Yeah, definitely.
Something that was outside. They were trying to do one thing. He came up with something completely different, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's such a valuable piece of art. And I would describe it as a piece of art.
Yeah, I definitely would. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he approaches it almost... I think you're right. It's like a book, but it's also a little bit like the way films are made, because essentially you germ of an idea, you create a concept around that idea, you flesh out that concept, and then start storyboarding it, which is similar to film. And I think the documentary goes into it, but you'll see it's kind of like a cross between a film almost and like a book stroke script.
It's the vibe that you get from the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
but it's much less like a production line than you would get with a lot of games, which feel very much like they've come off a production line.
They do.
Let's hit this point and this point and this point and this point, and let's have this control mechanism. And it's all about kind of it's a very prosaic creation process. It doesn't really think about story and emotion and all those kind of things. It's just about, you go here, you go there, you shoot this, you do that.
No, and at the end, the game's titled Call of Duty.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, yes. I mean, if you look at who's trying to copy Naughty Dog, I suppose the Tomb Raider series is a little bit, which is ironic because, Uncharted copied or almost probably copied Tomb Raider. And now it's gone back to the beginning with Tomb Raider copying Uncharted. But Tomb Raider's cutscenes make me laugh compared to the Naughty Dog ones because the acting is just so wooden in them. I mean, it doesn't spoil the game because I like the gameplay, but you can see so much of the DNA in the Tomb Raider games of Uncharted. You can see how much they've borrowed the way that they create these little action vignettes, and the way that Nathan Drake does that. It's very cinematic. It's interesting.
Credit to Nolan North, fantastic.
Oh, he's brilliant, yeah. And Troy Baker, he's a good actor.
Yeah.
They both seem to be in everything that's released.
Well, you understand, especially Naughty Dog games. I mean,
exactly.
Argue that part of their success would be due to these two voice actors. I think they probably don't get enough credit.
Ashley Johnson as well.
Obviously,
as Ellie.
Yeah, they're the actors that push these scenes through. Like if you replace these guys with other actors that aren't up to the same quality, I'd argue that some of these games wouldn't have been as successful.
Yeah. I mean, I used to joke with my mates years ago when I was a teenager at the time, so when we used to watch Australian soap operas. They said it's always the same actors in them. They just move between the different ones, and it's like the games industry where the major AAA releases always have the same voice actors, but that's for a reason. It's because they're so good.
And they're so versatile as well. Yeah. They don't just sound like the same person. Yeah. Like Nolan North played Flying Robot in Destiny. Like he voiced that, and you would not get that from.
I didn't.
Yeah, no, he replaced I've forgotten his name now.
Peter Dinklage,
the small guy. Yeah. Yes, he replaced him because he wasn't available to do the DLC voicing, so they completely replaced him with Nolan North. He's fantastic, better than Peter Dinklage. Like he's fantastic, but he's so versatile. And that's why he can do all these different roles for all these different games and studios.
Yeah, when you consider Nolan North's had that small part in The Last of Us as David, and his voice sounded completely different, because he managed to disguise it. He didn't sound like he normally does. And of course, when I was doing my Shadow Complex video, I thought that voice sounds familiar, and it was Nolan North in that as well. the main character. So yeah, he gets around. Okay, well, we've run at like an hour and 22 minutes now, so maybe time to wrap it up. Yeah.
A lot of editing there, Sully.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Sorry.
I was thinking we could carry on for another hour.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to go take a shit where you talk, Joe.
He's going to take a huge dump on the stage.
Hold on.
Okay. Yeah, start weeping and hollering.
All right, do you want to take us out,
Yeah.
Grant?
Okay, thank you for listening to another episode of Average Gamer. As usual, we'll put links to our channels in the comments below, and we'll be available on iTunes, and you can also find us on Twitter, and we'll put those links as well below. So in the meantime, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.